Huh? He's laughing.
Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. People are still coming into the waiting room.
Riding a moped?
Yeah. Find a radio-controlled plane inside. All right, we'll give it one more minute. People are still streaming in.
Chris, just so you know, we are recording right now. I'm still working through getting a stream up on Facebook.
Okay. Yeah, let me know when you get that. You got to be loving the glow of the computer after a week or plus living in the tent. Oh wait, yeah. Not at all. Not at all.
I've returned to a couple eventful days in the in the country.
Yeah. Who is more excited, the employees or the dogs that you were back in town?
Oh, dogs for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, it's always stressful traveling and having the dogs at home. But this time, fortunately, my dog sitter worked out really, really well. I was really happy with her.
That's good. All right. How we doing there?
I don't want to hold this up based on Facebook. I'm going to keep working through this. I am recording, so this will be up on YouTube afterwards. But if we want to get started, let's not delay it any further. Right. I will just sort of work through it as we're going.
Sounds good. We're at 8:05 anyway, so let's do it. Do we have it? Is it on any of the Facebook feeds or?
No, and I'm trying to figure out what the issue with it is.
No worries. We can get it there after the fact. If you figure it out, that's fine too. Anyways, welcome everybody to another one of our virtual events. If this is your first New England chapter BHA virtual event. Well, welcome. If you've been to a few of ours, fantastic. Welcome back. For those of you who are just sort of discovering some of these offerings, we've had some really good presentations, all of which you can find on our chat YouTube channel, on our Facebook group page, and catch those if you're interested. So the way it's going to work today is we're going to hear from Tony and Mo in just a moment. But I just want to give you guys just a quick rundown for those of you who might be new to Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Just want to talk a brief about that organization, our organization. BHA is located all around the country and in Canada with chapters with chapters breaking them up regionally by state, or excuse me, by state or by region. So our New England chapter consists of all the New England states, and we have state leadership teams in each state and work on various issues related to public lands. BHA is the sportsman's voice for public lands, waters, and wildlife, and that's a role that we take pretty seriously with various boots on the ground type projects, and also educational events, mentorship, and a number of other initiatives that we have going. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Chris. I'm one of the board members here in New England. I'm being helped out by Michael Woods, our co-chair of the New England chapter, and again, welcome. The way we're going to do this is we're going to have it sort of a guided conversation with Tony, Mo, and Barry Whitehill as well. And if you have questions along the way, please use the chat function that's located on the bottom portion of your screen. Type in a question that you have. We'll grab those. We're going to collate the questions, and the second half of the evening, we will go through those questions and make sure they get answered. Should we not get to your question, we'll keep track of it, and we'll get the questions to Tony and Mo. If we can follow up with you, we'll definitely do that. So without further ado, let's get going. Here we're here to talk about a pretty amazing DIY caribou hunt that just happened relatively recently. And before we get to all the details, the logistics, the planning, the actual hunt, which I'm really excited to hear about, I just want to again introduce Tony and Mo and have them tell a little bit who they are, their connection to BHA, but also sort of for everybody watching here to get a little sense of what their hunting background is, their travel experience, and if you guys can talk about whether or not you've done anything like this, I think that would be good just for the perspectives for the perspective of everybody here. So Tony, Mo, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Mo, do you want to start off?
I'll let you start, Tony.
No, you start. No worries. Yeah. So again, Chris, thanks for putting this together. So a little bit about me. I'm retired military. So as far as travels go, I've probably been to 40 different countries around the world. As far as hunting trips go, until this year, this is really the first time I've been out, either out west or to Alaska to hunt anything bigger than a whitetail. Most of my hunting experience is on the East Coast. And then, except for a trip Mo and I took last year. Yeah, so this is really my first trip kind of into any sort of backcountry for hunting. And so it was a fun experience. Looking forward to chatting about it.
Excellent. Mo, how about you?
So yeah, I'm Mo. I am a board member in the Capital Region BHA chapter. Learned about BHA through a friend, went to an event and met a lot of tolerable people, which is not common, and just started getting into some of the events. I've traveled quite a bit, I don't think 40 countries like Tony, maybe 30, so I won't one-up him, but I'll one-down him a little bit. I started hunting in college actually, and actually got into more of the backcountry type of hunting because I could learn how much I needed to learn in a short period of time. It was just like compressing a lot of lessons. So yeah, that's how we got there.
Excellent. So you guys had hunted before together, so you had that familiarity. How was it the decision made caribou or Alaska caribou? How'd that all come about?
Well, a couple different ways. So earlier this year, I was actually planning on doing an elk hunt with a buddy of mine. I think he's on here tonight. I think I saw him that lives up here in Connecticut. And we waited a little bit too late to get our tags. And so we kind of had to redirect in June. I thought, well, so I started researching caribou in Alaska. And then Mo had a trip already kind of in the beginning planning stages. And hey, man, you should come on this caribou trip. I'm like, awesome, yeah, because I've been kind of researching that. And so that's how it kind of got started from my end. So, Mo?
Yeah, from my end, I had a friend over at BHA who's friends with the infamous Barry Whitehill and Patty, and I think it started by inviting him to Hawaii, which was a trip that Tony and I did for axis deer and mouflon sheep, and he was like, "Hey man, you ever think about hunting caribou? Because it's one of those things that I'm not sure we'll be able to do a decade from now. Not that any of us will be able to move to hunt caribou at that point, unless you're Barry Whitehill. But yeah, so started thinking about it, and he was going out with one other person, and I was like, oh man, Tony's like a great hunting buddy. Like, can I vouch for a guy that needs to come out and that you got to meet? They didn't make it. We linked up with Barry, and yeah, it's all history.
Yeah, it sounds as though that Barry is, from a little I know of the story, Barry is a key player in pulling this all together. Barry, you want to talk a little bit about your, well, you're an Alaskan resident. You want to talk a little bit about your knowledge of caribou and how you guys, or how you set these guys up for success?
Well, let's see. What Mo was kind of pointing to, I was contacted by two individuals with BHA, and nothing was said about extras like Mo or Tony, but and then at the last minute they bailed out. But then I get this email, and it's like, hey, got a couple guys that are thinking about a caribou hunt. Can you kind of point them in the right direction? Well, I think, I don't know, correct me, Mo, Tony, that was what, the end of July? And caribou season opens August 10th. And so when I kind of heard it was late in the game for trying to set something up, initially I was contacted by Mo, and so I gave him the standard, well, talk to some air taxis and they can drop you off, and knowing full well that most all the reputable air taxis, they've been booked up for a year already. So it's late in the game. And then Mo mentioned that he had a buddy that had hunted a registration hunt on the Taylor Highway. And quite frankly, that's turned into a real goat rope as far as not putting hunters in the best light, because there's a lot of motorized, it made front page this year. There's a lot of less than ethical activities, and it's all concentrated. So you can have hundreds of caribou within a stone throw away from a major road, and people are literally lined up and there's no place to park, and you can imagine what kind of chaos. And it's not controlled very well, and it's just surprised me to this point there hasn't been some major fatalities. But anyway, based on that, I think I gave Mo some Alaska Department of Fish and Game connections to talk to, and next thing they know, it was like they're all in. So It just worked out on my adventures that I could go out with him for a few days, and it was an eye-opener to me. I took him to a spot that I hunted 25 years ago, and I was the only one in there. And I've killed 60-inch bull moose in there. Nobody else is in there. I've seen legal rams in there. We get there, and more first light, I can see 9 backpacking tents spread across the landscape, people everywhere. I watched one guy in the course of an hour take 15 shots on a caribou and never hit it. And it was like, oh, Andy, M. But bless their hearts, I mean, Tony and Mo were great troopers, and persistence paid off. So
Yeah, and we're gonna get to that, but so the truth is out. You guys basically pulled this off in a matter of weeks. And there's probably someone right now looking to already typing in different flight options for the following year, which sounds like it might have been a good plan. So Tony and Mo, you guys have traveled together. You've done, like you mentioned, that just had done the Hawaiian trip, some whitetail hunting, but still logistics are a little bit more complicated here. You want to talk a little bit about like some of the gear, how you kind of selected that, how you packed for this, and walk us through that a little bit and what you learned in the process.
Yeah, so logistically, like Mo and I really didn't get involved into the logistics until like 2 weeks out. Because our original dates were going to be like right at the end of August. And then when the other two guys dropped, and we talked to Barry, and Barry's like, well, yeah, you need to be up here on the 10th. We're like, oh, well, that's in like 2 weeks. So we kind of jumped through our ass in the planning process. And so we got our flights. You can get your license online. We waited till we got there to get our tags, because the tags were going to take about 2 weeks to get to us. But as far as gear goes, because we were kind of prepared initially, because we weren't quite sure where we were going initially. We were either going to go far north, like up towards the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, or we're going to go to the White Mountains, which is where we did go. And so we were kind of prepared to go out and spend like 4 or 5 days unsupported. So gear-wise, a sizable pack. Like I had a Mystery Ranch Marshall, which is, by sizable, I mean probably
5,000 CUs or above.
Yeah, at least, if you're going to spend, and we ended up not spending that many days actually camp or like in the backcountry, but if you're going to, that's probably what you're going to need. And with the capability to pack out meat too, if you're going to, if you plan actually on shooting something, you want to pack that meat up. What else am I missing? What was the other part of that question?
I don't know. I think for gear, since I seem to mess things up and forget, and Barry will probably point this out, so I'll jump ahead. But he did warn me, bring plenty of rain gear. The weather is nuts in Alaska, and Barry's got plenty of stories of being dropped off on a hunt and the air taxi not being able to pick him up for 2 weeks from their scheduled pickup because of weather. So the first 3 days that Tony and I went out, I soaked through my boots and all of my clothes, and I had like 2 or 3 changes of clothes, and I ended up wearing some Gore-Tex backcountry skiing pants on the last day because it was that bad. So I'd say rain gear is pretty clutch. Very clutch. Plenty of changes of wool socks. Don't bring any cotton whatsoever. So learning how to pack the right stuff was a mixture of doing some research online and then talking to Barry as well.
Excellent.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Kind of key to that as well. You can't go up there with shitty boots, or you're going to have a miserable time. But it's definitely worth spending a little bit extra money on some good boots.
And what about firearms? I believe you guys were using rifles. You want to talk a little bit about that setup?
Yeah, so I think both Mo and I are shooting Remington 700s in a 308, and a little bit heavier grain than you probably used to for a whitetail. So I think I was shooting 186 grain, but I mean, probably anything 165 or better would probably be sufficient. Said I know Mo was shooting 700, but I don't know what grain rounds he was shooting.
Oops. Yeah, I think I had the Federal 165 Nosler. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the round I shot. And if you have a detachable magazine well, don't forget your magazine when you go out into the field, by the way.
Oh boy. So all right.
But Mo and I are kind of hunting different ravines, and I heard a shot. I was like, oh, I wonder if that was Mo. And then I heard a second shot. I was like, no, it couldn't have been Mo. He doesn't have a magazine.
One at a time. One at a time. All right. So you've got your gear. You've got the rough outline of where you're going and how you're getting there. Thanks to Barry. Let's take us to your arrival. Where do you fly into Alaska, and like get us to camp?
So we both flew into Fairbanks. Got in like late at night. I think I don't remember. It's like maybe around midnight or a little after midnight we got in. And I made arrangements to stay in I got in the night before Mo, and I stayed in just a Hampton Inn in Fairbanks there. Like I just got an Uber, got all the gear to the airport. Just took an Uber to the hotel, and then linked up with Barry the following day.
Yeah, I'd say for other folks coming in, Fairbanks is great. I actually ran into another BHA'er from the Capital Region on my initial flight out, and he was flying into Anchorage and doing a caribou hunt. But a really important thing that Barry highlighted when we first spoke was getting a rental car that was legal to bring out to some of these dirt maintained highways. And coming from different parts of the country, it may be weird to hear that term, but like a dirt maintained highway, but it's kind of important. So you can't rent from the airport there for a trip like this. You'd either have to go with Go North Alaska, or there was 4x4 Alaska, I believe, out of Fairbanks, about half a mile from the airport or so, where you can get a 4x4.
That's a good tip.
If you went that route, we got a cap on the back of ours, because you can pull up and sleep in the back. You can lock gear in the back. You can sleep in the back. So I would definitely recommend, and it's only like an extra $30 to get a cap on the truck. So it was well worth it to have that.
Excellent. So yeah, take us to camp. How did you? What was the? Obviously we don't need to give away Barry's spots here, but get us to like talk about how you got into the place where you guys were hunting, and how the day-to-day hunts went, and take us to putting an animal on the ground.
Yeah, so it was several days before we actually camped on day one. I think we both downed our caribou on the last day, so there was a lot of hunting in between there. So we linked up with Barry, and so the season started on Monday, and on Sunday afternoon we went out to this valley we were going to hunt, and we just camped at the truck. There was a little, and I guess we're probably 70 miles out of Fairbanks ish, and there was just a little campground at the end of this dirt road, and we were hunting a foot traffic only, so no ATVs were allowed in this area. So we camped at the truck, Day one, well, and some of the people we talked to when we got there, like, oh yeah, there's hundreds of caribou in the valley. So in my mind, like, oh hell yeah, we're gonna be filling our tags. We're gonna be fishing for grayling by Tuesday. I'm good with that. And then so we got up early and kind of went up to the top to the ridge line. So we kind of get to the ridge lines and just glass. There's some basins up there. We glass the little ravines and glass in the far hillsides. And the first day, we probably, I don't know, we saw a good amount of caribou. And they'll pop up out of nowhere. The terrain is such where you might be sitting in a spot and you can't see all the nooks and crannies and folds in the terrain. And it looks like there's nothing. You haven't seen anything for hours, and all of a sudden there's 20 caribou standing there. Like, where the hell did they come from? So that they can pop up out of nowhere. But like Mo said, rain gear was kind of important on that first day. Probably 2:30 in the afternoon, it just started to it opened up, and it just we got soaked on the first day. Yeah, and then day two, same thing. We got up early, but we got up to the mountaintop. Again, probably 6 o'clock, and I had about 30 minutes of good visibility. And then the fog rolled in, and I just sat there for 4 hours. Well, probably longer than that. Sat there until almost 11 o'clock, where I couldn't see more than 50 meters. And so I took a nap. I made coffee, walked around a little bit, and then finally it opened up again. And then the rain just started. So yeah, we got pretty wet the first couple of days. We did see caribou. I mean, every day we saw caribou. And as the week kind of went on, we went back into Fairbanks, I think on Tuesday night or Wednesday, to kind of refit and dry out. And we went to the Alaska Fish and Game. I mean, I was talking with them even before I went up. They are super helpful and more than willing to give you information. I had a few conversations with them prior to going up there. So we just went to their office there in Fairbanks and like, hey man, what's where do you think we should go? Or just asking for advice. And they pointed us to a couple areas a little bit further out. And again, trying to stay away from the circus that Barry had mentioned earlier. And we ended up only those next couple of days. We packed up to the mountaintop. We saw some moose tracks, saw some moose droppings. Saw a few caribou when we first get up there, and the next day, just kind of walking around a little bit, blasting. We didn't see a whole lot, so we were kind of a little bit discouraged and like, well, maybe if we don't see anything, we'll just go back in and we'll spend our last day. We'll spend our last day grayling fishing. So we almost didn't hunt on that last day. I had another buddy of mine that gold mines way out towards central Alaska, which is I think maybe about 130 miles east of Fairbanks. And so we went out with him on that Sunday and got up to these ridge lines and we're glassing. And we see these caribou probably 1,500 meters out on this ridge line. And previously, like when we'd seen them earlier in the week, we saw some like on the other side of the valley, but they were close to a mile away and moving away from us. There's no way in the world we would have ever caught up to something like that. These ones were kind of on our same elevation on the ridge lines. Like we could actually move on these and might have a chance. And so we were right on the ridge line. We were able to drop down over the ridge and make up some ground on them. So we moved about 500 meters and peeked up over the top, and they were in this little basin, and they were starting to move away from us. So we were glassing and or just keep kind of watching them, and they finally laid down. So we dropped back down out of sight and hauled ass up to where we about where we were, or about where the caribou were, and we crept up over the edge, and we were in a position where we couldn't really get a shot, just the way the terrain was. If we crept up much more, they probably would have seen us, and we couldn't really get a shot there. So we kind of backed down, and there's a little rocky hilltop right there. So we kind of crept along the edge of the rocks, and then probably the last 20 meters, we literally crawled on hands and knees to get up to the point where we could get a shot. And then it was about a 150-yard shot at the end. And again, I think there was 7 caribou there.
7 or 8, all bulls.
Yeah, and so a bunch of bulls. So we kind of had our pick, and so we had to kind of we were in the prone laying down, so we had to kind of catch our breath before we could actually take a shot. But yeah, it was it went pretty smooth after that with both down bulls right there.
I'll add to
Nice.
Tony's part because he's being nice. Really bring a good hunting buddy with you if you take this trip, because Tony, in all his old age, can still get up a mountain pretty fast, but I was out of breath. So once we got into a good shooting position, I was just like, just panting. And he's like, hey, man, let me know when you're ready to shoot and we'll do a countdown. And I'm just like trying to get my sight picture, and just like my lungs are expanding faster than I could remember them doing so, unless the hostess truck was coming into town. But the caribou were there. It was kind of like nap time for them almost. And finally caught my breath, and we did a countdown, and both shot. And the weird thing about caribou is they're seemingly like curious animals. So it's not like whitetail where if one shot goes off, like they're all just bolting. They'll kind of hang out a little bit. And actually a guy from my BHA chapter, Larry Williams, who's an absolute predator in the backcountry, he told me, he's like, yeah, I shot one on my trip, and then I walked over to the ridge where my friend was at and brought him over to the ridge where I was at, and then he shot one. And I was like, how the hell does that happen? But connecting was really amazing on the last day. But I don't think I would have cared if we came back empty-handed. Like the trip, for one thing, like kind of like it was full circle with the whole BHA thing. Like, with COVID, Mystery Ranch was supposed to send me a pack. It didn't come through. This dude, Sean, who's on our board, sends me an Exos pack, like FedEx overnight to my house. He lives like the next state over from us. And then Larry giving information. It was, and linking up with Barry in Alaska. It was like, it's pretty cool that, you have all these people who love something so much that they're willing to share it with folks. So I'm going to stop my tangent there, but.
No, I think that's a really important part of this. I mean, first off, you guys shared this awesome experience together, and not only that, had the support of other people who are clearly rooting for your success. I did have a couple follow-up questions to the hunt. You mentioned that the caribou don't seem to be too skittish in terms of, like, after these shots were fired. What's their reaction to, in terms of like general overall pressure or seeing like humans on the landscape? It seems like the landscape is, and maybe you also want to talk a little bit about what the landscape looks like. But it seems as though they're kind of ducking in and out of sight. And maybe Barry, with your experience, you can talk a little bit to this point of just how caribou respond to pressure.
Well, Chris, up in Alaska, I don't know how many herds we have. We have, several. And I think, the herd they were hunting was the 40-mile herd, basically. And in this case, they're above timberline, so they're up in the tundra. But having said that, there are times when they're down in the timber moving through as well. So caribou are pretty curious critters. I just came in 2 days ago from a remote Brooks Range caribou hunt, and we were in hundreds of them, and it was the same sort of deal. Dropped a couple caribou, and the other ones kind of stood around, kind of, wondering what's going down, and eventually moved off. But it's not total panic like you have with, say, white-tailed deer. They're they kind of are curious about things, and sometimes they'll even come up to you. But you know, one of the things that I spent a lot of time with the elders in the villages, and I asked one esteemed elder, "How do you know which way the caribou are going to go?" And he said, "Oh, that's easy. They always follow their nose." And it's like, but they end up like Tony talked about. I mean, virtually they can disappear and reappear and be, you know, going 180 degrees somewhere else. So, you know, there's times they're pretty vexing critters to chase. You think you got them figured out, and you don't. So you just have to, you know, don't get wrapped around the axle. That's the other thing with caribou hunting, especially if you get into a situation. I know a lot of people that are first time make the mistake of dropping the first animal that comes along, especially if they're in a drop situation where an air taxi dropped them off. And then they can sit there for several days with nothing to do because they dropped the first animal, and then eventually have huge bulls come wandering through. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So caribou are interesting critters. They're fun.
Yeah, sounds like it. So Tony and Mo, so you got these guys on the ground. What's that? Talk about your how you packed out the meat, that whole process, how you carried it out, and how that all played out.
Yeah, so we were a good ways back in, and yeah, I wish I could tell you that yeah, we loaded 100 pounds of meat on our back and we packed it out. We made like 15 trips, but yeah, that's not the case. I had a buddy up there that had ATVs, and we packed it on ATVs, man. So it wasn't yeah, not gonna lead you down this long story about how it was rough getting it out, but yeah, that's how we got it out.
Hey, sometimes on the last day, the last thing you needed to be doing was running with heavy packs to get out of there on time.
I was flying out late Monday night, and we shot these caribou at 12:30 on Sunday, like so midday on Sunday, and even with that, we didn't get back to the truck until maybe 6:30 that night. And then
yeah, it was the processing was pretty. Alaska's got some pretty interesting rules about processing game meat. So you know, just from it's actually really good, but they don't want you to waste anything. So you know, we were very meticulous about getting the meat out. You got to bring some good game bags with you. I think I had Argali that Hunt to Eat sells, and those were pretty clutch. But yeah, I mean, it took a while, and I think Tony, between me, you, Barry, and Patty helping as well, we processed your caribou and only had it half frozen by the time you were ready to fly out, about 18 hours after we got back to Fairbanks.
Yeah. Yeah, so good point about the game bags. So I showed up and I got this advice from somebody else to get these bone out these bone out game bags, and so that's what I showed up with. I showed him to Barry, and he's like, I thought he was just gonna throw them in the trash right there. He's like, yeah, I don't take those. And he gave me a handful of game bags to actually take out there, and I'm thankful he did, because yeah, those game bags that I had were not going to work. So you need to actually get some good sized game bags. And by the time we were done, so the only thing we left on the ground was the hide, or I left the hide behind. Mo brought his, but pretty much the spine and the hide was the only thing that was left behind. And everything else on that animal got used. So like the legs, we brought. Barry had contacts, and the legs got used to make some type of like native boots, and the bones were going to make stock, and the scraps were going to some sled dogs. So yeah, every piece of that. So the only thing that left in the field was the spine and the hide on mine.
Wow, great. I just want to remind folks that if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we're going to kind of collate those. We're going to get to those in a minute. We've got a bunch already. So before we get to that, though, the question Q&A portion. What knowing, have you done, you've been through this once already. How would you, what would you do differently? What, what would you do differently? What might you take, lessons learned, that kind of thing?
So what would I do differently? Geez, that's a good one. I
Find a better hunting buddy.
do differently. Just like Barry said, the caribou. That was one thing that kind of not really irritated me, but like damn, I wish you. But like elk and whitetail, that you've got an idea of what they're going to do. You can bugle up some elk, and you've got an idea what their travel patterns might be. And whitetails, where they might be bedding, or they're moving to food, and so you can kind of pattern them and give yourself maybe a better chance at banging an animal. But the caribou, it's just like it's just being in the right place at the right time, because they're migrating, they're constantly moving, and there's really nothing we could do except we're walking ridge lines and glass until we see them. And so so we started hunting on Monday. By Friday, and I was getting a little bit frustrated. Like, oh well, we've seen caribou every day, but we just really didn't see anything that we could shoot. And so yeah, that was a little bit frustrating. But yeah, as far as lessons learned, yeah, I don't think there's anything there's not a whole lot that I do differently. So there's maybe a couple different areas we define just based off the like Barry said, there's a lot of areas, especially closer into Fairbanks, that can be quite a circus, especially if the herd is crossing the road. We just try to stay away from those places, and try to stay away from the shootout at the OK Corral there. But
Tony, I think there are a couple things that I would have done differently. Like I said, first of all, find a better hunting buddy. But no, I think the key for logistics in Alaska, and something that Barry really impressed upon me, was like, hey, consider this like your first trip out here to figure out logistics. And then I thought when I got there, like, hey, I'm going to figure out logistics for Alaska so I can plan the perfect trip next time. But what I learned is that there is no perfect trip, and that you have to be extremely flexible. So I would actually almost say, like, leave an open ticket on your way back home. Be ready to quit your job, do whatever, because it's one of the greatest experiences. And I'm a little mad I didn't get to share it with a special someone who's probably 2 rooms away from here, but we'll be back in Alaska at some point. But it's just such beautiful country that it would have been nice to have a few extra days out there. And on the other part, I'd say lessons learned is patience, because Tony brought it up. If I were to just like title this hunt one thing, it'd be called glassing for dongs, because being an out-of-state hunter, you have to look for a penis sheath on caribou. Their caribou, the cows and the males have antlers. So coming from the East Coast, where if anything has an antler, right away it's a male, but that's all you can shoot with an out-of-state permit. So I would train your eye a little bit, and you don't have to literally be looking for wild game genitalia, but you could just be bird watching and just looking for different patterns and colors so you can pick up on that. But it taught us a lot about patience. And the other biggest lesson learned was I taught Tony and Barry this. This is the highlight of the trip. Was my favorite unit of measurement is the CFAR. And it's basically you see far one time as far as you can see. That is the unit of measurement. You get there, and then there's the next CFAR, and that's literally what this hunt was like. So maintaining a positive attitude, and yeah, I mean that was just so major, because I think we both got frustrated at different points, but as soon as we kind of picked up on it, we were like, hey, like, let's stay positive, take a step back, like take a pause and realize like how amazing this is. Like, just look around. And yeah, it was cool. Like, I remember reading about Pebble Mine, and notionally I was like, I should care, right? This is public land and public water. Like, it sounds messed up, but the second you get out there, it truly resonates, like, on a different level. So yeah, I hope that made sense.
Oh, awesome. And congratulations, guys, just for just an outstanding adventure. Great trip. And it's like, Mo, you kind of pointed to it, that it would have been a successful trip even if you guys both didn't drop Caribou on that last day. But I mean, that was certainly the icing on the cake for sure. I want to get to some of the questions that have come in. And so first question that we received was, someone was curious if you brought any personal protection, kind of looking at bears, handgun, bear spray, why you went that route. I think that's a very common question. And you know, Barry, if you want to chime in on your experience in terms of that aspect.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And, you know, kind of to illuminate a little bit more about myself, what brought me to Alaska, I was with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So in the course of working up in Alaska with the federal agency, I was on the interagency bear safety committee that brought all the federal agencies and the state agencies together to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music as far as bear safety information goes. And I guess what the question would be, if it was me, I don't carry a handgun. Since you're hunting with a rifle, I mean, you got that firepower with you. If I'm float hunting, I often bring a 12-gauge shotgun because I can use a deterrent round, like a beanbag round, to, if I have a young bear that needs educating and I don't want to deal with him just lethally. But by and large, sadly, I do know of one situation where an individual, a geologist, a young lady, used bear spray and the bear came back and killed her. It was a black bear male. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. But up until that time, and it's the only time since, that there has been a documented fatality that I'm aware of if somebody used bear spray. So by and large, I guess I would say bear spray. I always carry a can of bear spray in my kitchen unit. I carry a can of bear spray in my toilet unit, so you don't have a cold nose sneaking up behind you when you least expect it, and you're prepared for it. And having said that, I'll give you a little tip too, and I've seen it work, is if you're gonna deploy bear spray, there's a good chance that you're gonna get the blowback. So you're gonna be writhing too in your eyes. But Johnson's baby shampoo, No Tears shampoo, works instantaneous. It's an oil. So that baby shampoo, I always carry a little container of it when we do these kind of trips, just for that situation.
Great. Thank you.
Barry didn't tell y'all about the most important part, which is the nah. Barry, can you please expand on that, sir?
Well, what he's relating, it's the Koyukon Indians have a term, anshla. It's a peace offering. And I unfortunately learned the hard way with a grizzly bear. And to this day, after that experience, which was kind of Stephen King-ish, we do our na, your offering. So every trip, huklani is another term of theirs, but knock on wood, it's worked to this day. And I'm a firm believer, and that's almost 30 years of running country, so up here. Oh, the na, the offering you make, anything that's important to you, and you give it to the land first or the river first. You don't take the first sip of your whiskey, you let the river have it. Or if you use chocolate or coffee, whatever's dear to you, you give your offering first. And it's worked for me.
Hey, that's great. All right, so yeah, I think Tony, you mentioned it a little bit, and Mo, you touched on it too. How it sound, and before the call, I sort of got a sense that this is still a process to get the meat home. But how have you so far got this meat home?
Yeah, so Barry's still sitting on a majority of my meat because it wasn't frozen. But-
Phrasing, Tony.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I need to choose my words a little more carefully around Mo. Yeah, anyway, the like places like Walmart, there's a couple of grocery stores, Sportsman's Outlet, they all sell these, or Sportsman's Warehouse. They sell these cardboard boxes that are insulated. And so you can go buy these boxes, and it's a good idea to have it, try to get it frozen before you stick in these boxes, but you can just check it as normal luggage. And said mine, a majority of mine wasn't frozen. I think I brought back about 45 pounds. So I looked into possibility of getting it FedEx back, and it was going to be ridiculous expensive to get it back via FedEx because it's going to have to be overnight. And so the upside of that is I get to I'm planning another trip back to Alaska to visit Barry and see if there's any backstrap left. And, so yeah, I'm gonna go back and probably retrieve the rest of my caribou next spring.
We got a lot of shank left, no backstrap.
It's all right. It's all right. You guys deserve it. Eat away. You know, and I want to kind of backtrack a little bit to the offering that Barry was talking about. You know, the days that we saw the fewest caribou. So Mo and I were packing up to this ridge line, and it would take 2 or 3 hours to get back in there, and we were going to be a little ways from a water source, and so we were trying to conserve water. And Mo said that told me, like, well, maybe you should just not drink coffee tomorrow. I said, Mo, I will shoot you in the damn leg before I give up morning coffee on a ridge line. And we didn't see shit. So there's a lesson learned on the offering. I should have just dumped the coffee in the stream, and we probably would have shot some huge bulls up there.
Well, we saw some great caribou that first.
Oh, we did.
That was 2 CFARs away from the crick, as Barry would call it. But we got 2 CFARs up, and there were a lot of caribou out there. But it ended up being like a really beautiful night with you, Tony, and I'm glad for the experience. But yeah, the na is very important. I'm partial because I studied cultural anthropology, so I find a lot of that fascinating, and that was probably the coolest part of this trip is like meeting Barry and Patty and seeing how hunting is so intertwined into the community. I think it actually influences Alaska Game and Wildlife policies on, like we were talking about, not wasting meat. You know, like as soon as we killed the caribou and we got back in, Barry's on the horn and he's talking to 5 different people that he knows, like each person what they want to use out of the animal. And I've never seen so much of an animal used before. And yeah, that was cool. I know it was in the question, but it was cool, so I thought I'd mention it.
No, great. This sort of relates to something you just said, the meat. There was a couple questions about how is it? What's the caribou meat? How does it relate to, I guess it seems like we keep referring to whitetail as the standard for the other game standard. So you want to talk a little bit about the meat and what you've had so far?
We've eaten probably a good bit of it so far, and we've had some friends and some friends over for dinner and to share it, and everyone has absolutely loved it. Even people that weren't big fans of like whitetail, I guess whitetail or venison, but I love it, and I'm probably going to run out. So I'm probably going to go through these 45 pounds that I brought home before I'm able to get back up to Barry's and get the rest of it. So I can get back up there and retrieve those 2 shanks that are left. But yeah, I absolutely love it.
Awesome. There was a question about what was the coolest thing that you remember from the trip besides the caribou? Great question.
Well, that's kind of a two-part question. First of all, it's Barry and Patty. They absolutely made the trip. And the other thing is just sitting, just camping out on these ridge lines, and like it wasn't when we were up there, it still wasn't getting totally dark at night. So Mo and I were camping out on a ridge line, and 10 o'clock, the sun is finally sinking below the horizon, and we're eating wild blueberries, and we're seeing caribou run down the opposite ravine, and just sitting on these ridge lines, watching the sun go down and watching it come up, and not seeing another person, and no cars, no nothing. And that was pretty amazing. Just being out there and just enjoying the White Mountains of Alaska.
Mo, how about you?
Yeah, for me, not to sound unoriginal, which I am guilty of a lot, but Barry and Patty absolutely made the experience. Not just because I've described Barry and Patty actually to my boss in a meeting. He was like, "Hey, so you just got back from Alaska? Tell me about it." I was like, "Well, I was with this guy who I would say is like a mix of Clint Eastwood, Grizzly Adams, and Mother Teresa, and Oprah. Actually, I'd add that, and then his wife, who's just like Mother Teresa. That's all I called Patty. She just got Mother Teresa, not just Mother Teresa, but Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Just like amazing, generous people, and seeing listening to them talk about their journey through BHA and getting involved, and how important it is to protect public lands, not just public lands, because these impact all lands. Was really cool. Learning more about myself, like on every backcountry trip, which is like, God, you got to get better at planning. You got to get more organized with things. It's all really great. And I think sometimes when you get out there in the middle of nowhere and you've been wet for 2 or 3 days, everything that matters in the world to you, like, all comes together. And I'm like, I'm here with a good friend. I'm out in like amazing country. And the only other thing I could think about were like 2 or 3 loved ones. And that was it. And I was like, this is life right here. And I thought that was pretty cool.
That's great. We're kind of getting short on time. So I'm going to pull together 3 different questions. So you guys, I think Barry introduced or mentioned the different herds, and you guys were also talking about the different air taxi services. Are there, and you mentioned too at the beginning of the conversation that you picked up tags when you arrived. What is the tag situation? Does it work by herd? Yeah.
Yeah, there's several herds in Alaska, but our state is broke up into game units, and bottom line, well, that's the other thing with caribou. You could set your watch by them every year for years, and then boom, they change. So the more intel you have, the better off you're going to be. And so like what Tony and Mo found, if you get a hold of Alaska Department of Fish and Game, they'll share lots. Also, don't overlook a lot of the federal agencies too. You have Bureau of Land Management, you have National Park Service. Up in Alaska, you can hunt the preserves on National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then, try, because oftentimes when you cold call, you're going to get a receptionist that, is kind of a hard filter. So the more nuances you have to reach out to the appropriate staff person, and know that summertime is a short season for us in Alaska, and everybody's going 90 miles an hour. So the more you can do it now and make the connection is going to set you up successfully for next year, say. And you definitely want to book your air taxis by January, or if you go with a guide, the good air taxis are going to book up first. So they're the ones that you're going to stake your life on if you use an air taxi system. And the same thing with rental cars and everything else. The more time you can invest in up to it, and plus over the phone you can make a relationship and then know who to ask for. And then lastly, I mean, if you really want to get down in the weeds, there's a lot of other organizations that not necessarily are they hunters, but they're out on the landscape quite a bit. Like in Fairbanks, we have an active Fairbanks paddlers group, and a lot of them don't hunt, but they're out there on the rivers and interacting with, you know, the animals. And a lot of those folks will gladly share information if they can get a cut of the moose. So
Yeah.
think
Awesome.
outside the box.
Great information. Tony and Mo, one last question that we got here towards the end, other kind of nuts and bolts. Can you give us a ballpark of what it costs to pull a trip like this off?
Yeah, so I'll back up to just the license for just a second, because that
Oh, sure, yes,
that'll
definitely.
pull into the cost. So I bought my license online. I waited to get the tag because our trip kind of got bumped up a couple weeks. I waited till we were on the ground there to get a tag, and I just went to Sportsman's Warehouse, and I think one of the was it Fred Meyer's? Yeah. So there's a handful of places in Fairbanks there that you can get your tags on the ground. So the tags are this year we're running $650. I think the license, I want to say it was maybe, or I can't remember, maybe 150 to 160. The airfare, again, the airfare depends on where you're coming from. I think when I first initially looked at the airfare from here, from New England, it was 500. And I think by the time we left, it was maybe up closer to 700. Well, because we had to kind of bump up our dates a couple weeks. And then the rental vehicle, when you're renting a vehicle, so there's only like 2 places in Fairbanks that will allow you to get those vehicles to take outside of the city that you can actually go on hunting trips with. And I think for the several days that we had it was, I guess Mo and I, it's again, always handy to have a hunt buddy or two to split this stuff up with. And I think that was, maybe about $800. So that was kind of and then plus food and other bits and pieces of just miscellaneous items too.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd just add that Alaska Airlines, I don't work for them, but here's a plug. They have a buy one, get one free ticket right now, and you can book it out to a year. And I love to travel on a budget. I've been doing it since I was a kid in college. You can always find a way. Like there's the flight deal, Scott's cheap flights, or the airline credit cards. You know, treat it like a debit card. This is the fiscally responsible person coming out here, but pay it off every week. You know, you spend your $3,000 in 3 months, and you get enough points to buy 2 round trip tickets to Alaska. So if you want to do it, it's doable. Figure it out.
Great. Awesome. Hey guys, Tony, Mo, Barry, Patty, thank you so much for sharing the experience. And if there was one thing that was definitely clear, is that BHA has one of the real strengths of BHA are the relationships that people form. And if that was ever a pitch, if you are not a member, please consider doing so. backcountryhunters.org/join. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us tonight. If you missed this conversation, if you want to replay some of this, again, this will be on the New England chapter Facebook group. It will also be on our New England chapter YouTube page. Thank you so much. You can connect with us on Instagram at New England BHA. And again, thank you, Tony, Mo, Barry, for sharing your experience. And hopefully we get to have another one of these conversations with you sometime in the future. Maybe what is your next hunt going to be? We got to go back to Alaska, catch some grayling, and retrieve some meat. That sounded definitely clear. Yeah, what's next? We'll close with that.
Well, I just had a great whitetail hunt this past weekend, and I think Mo is heading out to Colorado here shortly, but I'll let him tell you about that.
Yeah, I'm going out for elk soon. But Tony, I think our next hunt's back in Alaska, unless we both draw, or actually 3 of us draw Maine moose tags, and we drag Barry over to Maine. So I got a real good camp out there that he'd love, and bring Patty out too.
Well, Mo, actually, I, after almost 30 years of applying, drew a muskox tag.
Wow.
And I've got a hunt set up for the 3rd week of February on Nunivak Island. So, Mo, you can come out and pack muskox.
Hey, Barry, I'd do anything for you, man. So
thank you so much, everybody. And for all the people who tuned in, we appreciate it. We'll be back next month. We're going to be doing a tracking, whitetail tracking in the big woods, tracking in the snow. And then in November, we've got a sort of a focus panel on women in hunting. That will be an interesting and entertaining conversation. And then we've got Tune Up Tuesdays, which is our sort of tuning up for the various hunting seasons that go through the course of the year. That's kind of being led by our Vermont team. There's a ton of stuff, and we hope to see you guys in the future. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for putting this together, man.
Of course. No problem. Our pleasure.
Oh, great. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. And good luck, everybody, this season. Be safe out there. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mo.
Yeah, thank you, man. You really moderated that. Yeah, did a great job.
Well, I appreciate it. You guys said the adventure tells itself, that's the easy part. So I appreciate it. And I've been to Alaska a few times for work, which involves fun stuff, but unfortunately no chasing animals other than fish. So it has me jazzed. I was tempted to start filling out my Alaska Airlines credit card during the call.